having some I think fascinating and in some cases kind of arcane in the minutia, but on the other hand, I just find it all amazing what's going on here. And with me, I'm very, very pleased to have with me Paul Fontaine. He's a journalist with the Reykjavik Grapevine, and that website is grapevine.is. .is is the domain here in Iceland. And Paul, you in 2007 and 2008 were a member of Parliament, and you're an American. Mm-hmm. And also an Icelandic citizen now.
That's correct.
And so you've been here for
12 years.
12 years. So you have quite a perspective here. What is life like in Iceland, in the context of your American sensibilities?
Well, the culture is in many ways very Americanized. There was a NATO base here for many years. Mm-hmm. For example, you'll see a lot of examples of American mainstream culture. As opposed to other Scandinavian countries where it maybe is not so Americanized. But one of the major draws for me to this country was the strength of the social welfare system, mm-hmm. In particular with regards to healthcare and childcare and education. It's an incredibly strong system where, even as we just heard, people on the right, the conservatives even, believe that, yes, there should be some sort of national healthcare system.
Right. I always find it amazing in Northern European countries to get the conservatives on and then say, oh, you're conservative. Well, in America, the conservatives think that we should do away with national medicine, national healthcare system. And they go, what, are you crazy? Then why do you call yourself a conservative? I don't understand. Edmund Burke would not have wanted a national healthcare system.
No.
In fact, you were telling Louise and I your experience having a child here.
Yeah, it was amazing. My child was born in 2006. When we went to the hospital when my child's mother went into labor. I'd asked the nurse there, so how are we going to be billed for this? And she just looked at me like I was nuts and was like, billed? Like, no, you're not going to be billed. Like, oh, okay, we can work it that way too. That's fine. Yeah.
So the structure of the social safety net mm-hmm. in Iceland. What part, first of all, just a general overview. We mm-hmm. just talked about there's a national healthcare system.
Correct.
Old age pensions, mm-hmm. elderly health, child care, what education, mm-hmm. college education, what does it cost to go to college here, things like that. And what parts of that are at risk, either because of the bankster collapse mm-hmm. or because of internal political debates?
I would say, first and foremost, the education system. They've already had to make some cuts to the university system, as it is. Some years ago, primary schools and play schools were put under the jurisdiction of the municipalities, as mm-hmm. opposed to being a federal thing. Now, as they're now city-run, they only do as well as the particular municipality they fall under.
Right.
So in parts of the country, for example, the region of Suðurnes in the southwest, which has the highest rates of unemployment, somewhere around 12%, their schools are struggling, whereas in the northwest or in the north, where unemployment is somewhere between 2 to 5%, the schools are doing much better. But on a national level, the university has had to take some cuts. I think there's a danger there.
I understand to go to college, you have to pay the god-awful tuition of about $500 a year, U.S.?
Yeah. That's absolutely outrageous, $500. And you have to pay for books.
But seriously, I mean, that's the cost. It actually costs for full tuition for a year of high-quality university education, $500.
This is true. And I don't mean to minimize the situation. I mean, you have to understand this in an Icelandic context. I mean, granted, for those of us living in the U.S. who, are paying upwards of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to attend university, paying $500 doesn't seem like much, but when cuts are made to the university system in an Icelandic context, this, it hurts us. And in particular, I do think the university system would probably be in the greatest interest. And there's also been more talk about bringing in like 1 or 2 private hospitals into here, that private healthcare and public healthcare could exist side by side. And that's a debate that has been kind of on the sidelines, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the near future.
Well, Switzerland moved in that direction. They still don't allow for-profit health insurance, and I'm not sure if they have for-profit hospitals or not, but they do have basically if you have the money, you can buy into a more expensive system and be in a better hospital room and have 5-star meals catered and, out-of-country private jets if necessary, and you can pay. But there is still a minimal, and the minimal is like fairly high. I mean, it's still a good, healthy, bottom-line system. Nobody's talking about taking that away in Iceland, are they?
Not that I'm aware of, no. The problem right now in Iceland with regards to healthcare is brain drain. In particular, a lot of doctors will go overseas to be educated and just elect to stay abroad as opposed to coming back here. And I think that part of the reason why the talk about having private healthcare institutions like a private hospital in Iceland would be to keep these doctors in this country, that even if these private hospitals are owned by foreign companies, they could pay the types of salaries that they would be getting if they left the country. So it's a stopgap solution for a brain drain, as it were.
Well, and this seems to be one of the problems that we're even seeing in the United States. In some areas, the better doctors choose, or I don't know maybe they're not better, but whatever. In certain specialties, oncology and plastic surgery, you can make an enormous amount of money, and so there's a lot of oncologists and a lot of plastic surgeons. But general practice, which is really the most fundamental and needed, you can't make so much money, so there's not so many general practitioners. It's really hard to find a basic doctor in the United States, pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
And so you could see where if you had a country where doctors are not incredibly, they don't have the potential to become millionaires because of the national healthcare system, then moving to a country where you had that potential, if you went into one of those specialties, could be attractive to those people who are in it.
Well, certainly, and that's part of the reason why this debate has even gotten so much traction. I mean, I think that if we had our own doctors, if we had rather a lot more doctors staying in Iceland, that the very idea of inviting a private company to build a private hospital here would just be absolutely out of the question.
Is there a medical school here?
Yes.
Does Iceland train its own doctors?
Yes, there is a medical school here.
Yeah, it's interesting.
A lot of them will study. A lot of people will study abroad, however.
Right. The debate between left and right. You've heard the last hour and a half of the program, and I'm curious your thoughts on the political system here, and what, as looking at it as an American, how would you describe it to an American who doesn't understand the complexity of this kind of multi-party state?
Well, essentially, it's funny that you use the word multi-party, because in many ways we do have a two-party system. There's the government and there's the opposition. So right now, like, it doesn't matter how many parties there are. There's currently 5 in Parliament right now. But there could be 5, or they could be 3, or they could be 20. There's always going to be a ruling coalition, and when they get together, they decide on a joint platform. So they are effectively one party, the ruling coalition. And then there are the parties that are not in the ruling coalition, which would be the opposition. And traditionally, the opposition have also voted together on many things. Even though they might have separate policies, they typically fight against the policies of the ruling coalition, and so there's still like a bipolar, or rather, I'd say like a dual party system in many ways. Despite this, however, there is still a range of thought, as we heard earlier, in terms, like, even leftists do not agree with each other, and if they don't, then they, can and will split off and form their own parties. It's encouraged in many ways. Voting is not done so much. There's also a difference in terms of how voting is done. It is not so much candidate-based as it is platform-based. When we have our primaries here, for example, which is an incredibly complex system that I could not get into in the time remaining in the show, people are voting primarily for platforms. They're not voting for individual candidates based on their personalities or whether or not you could have a beer with them or something like that. Right. There is a little bit of that to an extent, but it's mostly platform-based.
Interesting. So the and I understand that Iceland has historically been ruled by the ruling party. The inside party has been kind of a left-leaning party, and now it's a right-leaning party. Do I have that right?
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah,
Okay, it's
Iceland has been the only Scandinavian country that's had a long-standing conservative government, and now we have a left-wing government,
and which is under assault because of the banksters.
Correct.
And in the 30 seconds, what are we going to do about the banksters here in Iceland?
Essentially, I think that we really need to get tough in terms of regulation. But cronyism is going to be very hard to fight because there's still a lot of overlap between private business and politicians, unfortunately. A lot of them went to the same schools or even are in the same families. Are
private corporations here allowed to basically buy politicians like in the United States with lobbying and campaign donations?
To an extent, yes. Campaign finance reform is becoming a more dominant issue, I'd say, in the discussion these days.
Is there public financing of campaigns?
Yes, through voters in any event. The one party every party typically will disclose who's been donating to them, except for the Independence Party. They've been very reticent about who's donating to them.
That's the right-wing party.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's interesting. In the United States, the Republicans don't like to talk about their donors either.
No, funny like that, isn't it?
It is. It's strange how these things work out. Mm-hmm. Paul Fontaine, journalist with the Reykjavik Grapevine.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Grapevine.is. If you want to read Paul's writing, Paul Fontaine, and Paul will probably be back with us a little bit later on in the program. Stick around. We'll be right back from Iceland. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Ron in Winchester, Massachusetts. Ron, I'm going to take your call, and then I want to bring back Paul Fontaine to just wrap this hour up. What's on your mind, Ron?
I just wanted to let Paul know that he was talking about how the doctors come over to the United States and they stay because of the salary. Maybe they don't stay just because of the salary. Maybe they like the United States and they enjoy the United States better because of, we may have more exciting things for them.
We have Disneyland. Yeah. Okay. Interesting, Ron. Let's ask Paul. Paul, welcome back into the studio. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's?
I think that's a valid point. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that plenty of people who go abroad to study do like to stay in other countries because they simply like the country that they're in. But the fact remains that we do have far too many doctors who are electing to stay outside of the country, and that is the main reason why there's been talk about building a private hospital here. Yeah. But certainly yes, salary is just one of possibly many reasons why people choose to stay outside the country.
It's kind of cold here. Although in the summer
this is an unusually cold winter.
Yeah,
this winter is not a good example.
Louise and I were first here. The first time we were here was in 1978. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, maybe before you were born, but a long time ago. In any case,
that's very flattering. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. The bankster crash. Can you give us, as an American who's spent 12 years here in Iceland and has some understanding of the situation, and a journalist and a former member of the Icelandic Parliament, an overview of how did this how did this economic crisis in this country happen?
The conservatives. That's how it happened. The conservative version of the story is that Iceland was the victim of a global recession, and there is absolutely nothing we could have done to prevent it, which is nonsense. I remember as a journalist in 2005, 2006, we had Standard & Poor's giving warnings saying that the Icelandic economy is overheating, that the banks are too poorly regulated, that the government needs to step in right now and do something. And the conservatives were in power at the time, and they dismissed this, and saying that these people were just jealous. Actually, it was one of the reasons he said that other countries were simply jealous of how well the Icelandic model was working. We had our president, who is still our president, traveling to other countries, talking about how the reason why we're so successful is because of the Scandinavian way of doing things. With the word for the businessmen who have traveled abroad and become successful, Útrásavíkingar, literally means Outvasion Vikings. It's referential to the going out and plundering.
Yeah.
So there was this type of arrogance that was sort of the attitude of the day when the conservatives were in power. That's how this happened.
So, why is it that, I mean, you know, some of our guests don't share your perspective on that or your point of view. Why is it that back an hour and a half ago, one of the very first guests we had on, who was more left-leaning, said that half of the country would go right right now if it was the right-wing ideology that brought down the country?
Well, a lot of it is hereditary voting. The Independence Party has been around for decades, I mean, since 1929, and a lot of people will vote for them simply because, you know, well, my father voted for them and his father before him. There's a lot of hereditary voting. And the Independence Party, before we had this left-wing government, had been in power for nearly 2 decades. And so
this is the right-wing party.
Yeah, it's like the default option is to vote for the right-wing party. And so when a lot of people are indecisive and they don't know who to trust, or they just have a general distrust of government in general, they just go with the default option, which happens to be the right-wing party.
But you have I can understand that in a country like the United States, 300 million people, and people don't know each other. They don't know the politicians. In Vermont, Bernie Sanders can do retail politics. There's 600,000 people in that state. He's probably met every single one of them in the 18 years he's been in Congress. Right. On the other hand, in California, where you got 34 million people, I think it is, it's impossible for a single senator to do retail politics. And so, a lot of people, in fact, most Americans, I'd say, are more easily can identify sports stars than political politicians, and really just pay attention for a few weeks before the election. But this is a country of about a little over 300,000 people. It's small enough that everybody should know up close and personal what the consequences of political decisions are. How can it be that people would vote based on this is how my father voted or my mother voted, rather than hey, this is the policy that I'm concerned about? Or is that just the human condition to say, politics, that's for those strange people who are into politics. And I'm really into rock and roll.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the human condition. I mean, regardless of whether Iceland was 300,000 people or 300 million people, there are always going to be people who just don't care that much about politics. And so they just end up, if they don't know who to vote for, they just don't trust politics in general. They'll vote for who their dad voted for, or they'll vote for who was the biggest party.
Or they'll vote for the opposition just to be contrarian.
Yeah, that'll also be the case.
It's kind of a variation on none of the above, or a pox on all their houses, or that's what we need. It's a pox on all their houses party, right?
Yeah, there's actually, if you combine, the last Gallup poll that was done showed that people who said that they were not going to vote, or that would submit a blank ballot, or would vote for a completely different party altogether, comprise about 15% of the electorate.
In Iceland?
Yes. And that shows a tremendous amount of voter dissatisfaction, I believe.
Right. But again, you have a government that when the people said don't pay back the banks twice, the government went ahead and did it. So I'd be upset too.
Yes, it's a valid point.
Yeah. And that's because that government is in bed with so many corporations, or there's so much.
I think it's more because, we are signatories of the European Economic Area, and being signatories of it, we are bound by certain laws, among them that we have to guarantee deposits put in our banks.
Okay. So the banksters win because the treaty was there.
It's the trade-off.
Yeah, okay. Paul Fontaine, again, grapevine.is, right?
Correct.
Do I have that right? Thank you, Paul. We'll be right back. Thom Hartmann here with you in Reykjavik, Iceland, and I want to wrap the show up here. Come back to Paul Fontaine, our friend who helped us put together this program, and many thanks, Paul, for being sort of our on-the-ground producer here in Iceland. You've done a marvelous job of getting these guests and working with us, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to get to know you and to work with you. But also, you're a reporter and an American perspective and an Icelandic citizen and a former member of Parliament, and so super informed. And and I understand that Iceland is rewriting their constitution and they're crowdsourcing it. What is that?
Well, essentially, when the crash happened, we had a group called the Special Investigative Commission, the SIC, come together to examine the causes of the crash. And after examining the causes, they came up with some suggestions for how we can prevent something like this from happening again. And one of them was to rewrite our Constitution. The Icelandic Constitution is essentially a copy-paste job of the Danish Constitution, with very few changes, such as wherever it said king was replaced by president, essentially. And that was many...
The king has virtually no power in Denmark, so the president here has virtually no power.
You would think so, but actually the president made huge changes to this country. Well, it was, the Ice Save deal, for example, was passed by a parliamentary majority twice, but because he refused to sign it, it went to a public referendum.
Oh, interesting.
So in those little ways, he can have a tremendous amount of influence. But with regards to the Constitution, the essential suggestion was we need to rewrite it. And so the idea of having a constitutional committee was formed. And the Constitutional Committee was essentially an open election where anybody who never held public office and never ran for office was welcome. The idea was to have like a citizens' parliament, in a way, of 25 people to come together and create suggestions for how the Constitution can be changed. That election, however, was found by the Supreme Court to break a number of election laws. A lot of them were minor technicalities, where some of them were pretty big, and the Prime Minister just appointed the 25 people who were elected instead. And so that's a completely separate issue. Now we have a constitutional committee of these 25 citizens, some of them well-known, some of them not well-known, who are in the process of pulling together suggestions from the general public on how the Constitution can be rewritten.
And that's interesting. So the 25 people who are pulling together these are not people who have not been in politics any longer. You have some people who are, because it seems to me,
they're all well-known people. None of them have ever held public office. None of them have ever run for public office. But some of them are well-known people, like they're bloggers or journalists or professors or what have you, who have been well-known to the public, but not as politicians. No.
Right. Okay. And in a small country where everybody is related somehow to everybody or knows somebody, or this earlier in the program has been described as the kind of source of crony capitalism, as a problem. That's one of the reasons why the banks went nuts, because, hey, I don't have to check out this guy. He's my brother-in-law, or he's my third cousin, or whatever. And how do you prevent that from screwing up the Constitution? I mean, one of the reasons that I'm opposed to a constitutional convention in the United States, even one with a great goal like doing away with corporate personhood, is that once you open up the Constitution to tinker with it, you've got people like the billionaire Koch brothers coming in, basically modifying, shall we say, the process, or influencing it in ways that might not be in the best interest of the average person. Is there that concern here that the very wealthy in Iceland are going to tinker with this thing, or is there not that many very wealthy here, or I mean, what's the potential downside, and how's it going?
Well, I think that particular danger of the wealthy having an influence on the Constitution has been safeguarded in the sense that the Constitutional Committee is in a sort of bubble where the only way in and out for any sort of influence is through the website that they've set up asking for suggestions from the general public.
Amazing.
And so for somebody to, walk into the office of a committee member with a suitcase full of money and say, hey, I'm going to pay you this much if you make this particular suggestion.
These people can't be lobbied, in other words.
No, they cannot be approached.
That's incredible. Politicians who can't be lobbied. I mean, it's like, Bernie Sanders.
But that's just it, is that they're not politicians, is the thing. So, and they cannot be bought.
So are they rewriting the Constitution?
Well, they're putting together suggestions for this, and these suggestions will then be submitted to Parliament for a vote.
And all of this is happening visibly on the internet. People can read what the suggestions are as they're posted. So you're crowdsourcing your new Constitution. Any interesting things coming out of this so far?
Well, one of the big things has been separation of church and state. We have a national church.
It's a Lutheran variation.
Yes, it's a Lutheran church, and one of the more contentious issues has been that the church should be utterly and completely separate from the government. They should not be getting any sort of funding from the government. And for Icelanders, that's a pretty big deal. But the majority of Icelanders these days support separation of church and state. They don't believe in having a national church.
Yeah.
The majority do not anyway.
That's fascinating. And economic reforms, are people in favor of like putting regulation of the banks?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Into the Constitution?
Absolutely. that is an incredibly complex issue, but there's having safeguards against, the banks being able to balloon up to the size they were. Mm-hmm. Again, also a number of inalienable rights for homeowners. Mm-hmm. So that you don't have people just getting turned out into the street, where you have a right to be able to appeal and on your mortgage if you're defaulting and what have you. There's a number of suggestions that have been put forward for these people on the Constitutional Committee.
That's remarkable. That's great. Paul, thanks so much for being with us, and it's much appreciated. At grapevine.is, you can read Paul Fontaine's work and some great reporting over and thanks again for your help in this program.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
It has really been great working with you.